The day my father called me a failure, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't lose control. He didn't even hesitate. He said it like a conclusion, like something he had already decided. You're not built for this. That came first. Measured, calm, final. Then, you're a failure. No anger, no emotion, just certainty. And that's what made it stay. Not the word, the way he said it. Because anger fades. But certainty? That rewrites you. 3 years later, I sat in his office. Same building, same company, same chair, just a different side of the table. He didn't call me a failure anymore. He didn't call me anything. He just watched. Because now, I was the one making decisions, and he was the one waiting. I grew up in a house where performance mattered. Not effort, not intention, outcome. My father didn't believe in potential. He believed in results. If you delivered, you were valued. If you didn't, you were corrected. And correction, in his world, wasn't guidance. It was reduction. He didn't punish mistakes. He removed recognition. And that taught me something early. Approval wasn't given. It was earned. But there was a problem. No matter what I did, it was never enough. By the time I was 17, I understood something. I wasn't being trained. I was being compared. Compared to his standard. Compared to his expectations. Compared to a version of success that didn't include failure. And failure wasn't part of his system. It was rejection. When I joined his company, it was an opportunity. It was evaluation. Everything I did was measured, not to improve me, to confirm him. And eventually, it did. It happened in a meeting. Not private, not quiet, public. You're not built for this. Then, you're a failure. In front of people who didn't speak, didn't react, didn't challenge him, because they worked for him. And in that moment, so did I. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, didn't explain. Because something inside me changed. Not emotionally, structurally. I stopped trying to prove him wrong and started trying to understand why he thought he was right. I left that day. Not dramatically, not impulsively, deliberately. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to meet his standard. I was trying to understand the system that made him believe he was the standard. I didn't leave to prove him wrong. That would have kept me inside his system, still reacting, still defined by him. I left to understand something else, how things actually worked, without him. The first few months were simple, not easy, simple. No title, no reputation, no protection, just work. The kind of work he used to call basic. Operations, logistics, process correction, the invisible parts. The parts that don't impress anyone, but keep everything running. At first, no one cared who I was, and that mattered. Because for the first time, I wasn't being compared. I was being measured. And measurement is different. Comparison is subjective. Measurement is real. I didn't rush, didn't try to stand out. I observed where things slowed down, where mistakes repeated, where systems depended on people instead of structure, and slowly, patterns started forming, not emotional patterns, operational ones. And once you see patterns, you can predict outcomes. It started small, a failing contract, not critical, but inefficient. People were trying to fix it, but they were fixing symptoms, not structure. So I changed the structure, quietly, adjusted workflow, removed redundancy, aligned timing. Nothing dramatic, just correct. It worked, not instantly, but consistently. And consistency builds credibility. People started noticing, not publicly, internally. Because real work doesn't get announced, it gets relied on. And once people rely on you, you matter. That's when it changed. Not outside, inside. I stopped seeing myself as someone who failed and started seeing myself as someone who understood. That difference matters because failure is a label. Understanding is leverage. One project became two, two became five. Different companies, different problems, same patterns. And every time, the solution wasn't louder, it was clearer. Most businesses don't collapse because people are incompetent. They collapse because people don't see the system. And my father? He didn't see systems. He saw outcomes. And that worked, as long as everything held. But systems always change. 2 years passed. Not quickly, not slowly, just correctly. By then, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was building something. Not a company. Not yet. A position. A place inside systems where I could see everything clearly. The first time I saw his company again wasn't personal. It was in a report. Performance metrics. Growth projections. On the surface, it looked strong. But underneath, I saw it immediately. The same pattern. Overconfidence. Dependency. Weak structure. The same things I had been fixing everywhere else. And that's when it happened. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Clear. He didn't call me a failure because I couldn't do it. He called me a failure because I didn't fit his system. And his system? It wasn't as strong as he believed. I didn't react, didn't reach out, didn't confront him. Because this wasn't about him anymore. It was about structure, and structure can be replaced. The next time I walked into his company, it wouldn't be as his son. It would be as something else. Something he never expected. Not someone trying to prove him wrong. Someone capable of replacing him. I didn't walk back into his company as his son. That would have been dismissed. Emotional. Predictable. I entered through the only place he respected. Value. Not identity. Not history. Contribution. The opportunity came quietly. Not from him. From the outside. A consulting request? Short term. Operational review. He didn't choose me. The board did. That mattered. Because it removed bias. Removed history. Removed him. When I walked into that building again, nothing had changed. Same reception. Same glass walls. Same people moving like structure was something they understood. But now, I saw it differently. Not as a place I belonged, as a system I could read. The numbers looked strong, revenue steady, growth consistent. But the operations? Misaligned, processes overlapping, departments compensating for each other, decisions based on speed, not structure, and most importantly, too many things depended on him. That was the weakness, because dependency is not strength, it's delay. I didn't challenge anything directly. That would have triggered resistance. Instead, I asked questions. Simple ones. Why this process? Why this timing? Why this dependency? And slowly, things started surfacing. Not problems, patterns. People started adjusting, not because I told them to, because they saw it. That's how real influence works. Not imposed, understood. The more I observed, the clearer it became. He wasn't managing the system. He was holding it together. Through presence, through authority, through experience. And that works until it doesn't. Because once the system grows, one person can't carry it. The board started asking questions, not aggressively, carefully, because they saw something, not failure. Risk. And risk requires adjustment. The first time he really looked at me again was in a meeting, not as his son, as a variable. You've been involved, he said. not questioning, recognizing. Yes, I replied. No explanation, no defense, because I didn't need to justify anything anymore. You're changing things, he said. I'm clarifying them, I replied. That difference mattered, because change can be resisted. Clarity can't. Over the next few weeks, small adjustments became visible. Better timing, cleaner processes, less dependency. Nothing dramatic, but everything. More stable, and stability creates confidence. Not in him, in the system. That's when the real issue surfaced. He wasn't the system anymore. He was part of it. And that changed everything. You think you can run this? He asked one day. Not aggressive, just direct. I looked at him, calm. I think it can run without you, I said. Silence. 'Cause that was the truth he wasn't ready for. The board didn't act immediately. They never do. They observe, measure, wait. But once they see something clearly, they don't ignore it. And what they saw was simple. The company worked better when it didn't depend on him. The next meeting wasn't about performance. It was about structure. And for the first time, he wasn't leading it. He was part of the discussion, and I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was already replacing him. The meeting wasn't announced. Not formally. But everyone knew what it was. Not a review, not a discussion, a decision. The board was already seated when we walked in. Not scattered. Aligned. That's how you know something has changed, when the room is already decided. He entered first. Of course he did. Still holding posture, still carrying authority. But this time, something was missing. Certainty. I walked in after. No title change, no announcement, just presence. And that was enough. We've reviewed the last quarter, one of the directors said. Calm, measured, neutral tone, but not neutral intent. Performance is stable, he continued. Pause. But structure remains a concern. There it was. Not failure, risk, and risk is what boards respond to. There is no instability, my father said. Confident, controlled. The same tone he had always used. But this time, it didn't hold the room. Because confidence without alignment doesn't convince. We've seen improvements in operational flow, another director said. And then, they looked at me. Not casually, deliberately. That came from your work. Not a question, a statement. I nodded once. No explanation, no performance. Just acknowledgement. You're restructuring without authority, my father said. There it was. Control. Trying to return. I'm correcting what's already there, I replied. Calm. Unmoved. That difference mattered. Because correction is harder to argue than change. This isn't about authority, the chairman said. It's about continuity. Silence. Because that word changed everything. Continuity means one thing. What happens when you're not here? What happens if you step back? Another director asked him. Not aggressive, not confrontational, just real. He didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, he didn't control the answer. The company depends too heavily on a single point of control, the chairman continued. And everyone knew what that meant. Him. We need to restructure leadership, he said. Clear, final, not a suggestion, a direction. The room went quiet, not tense, resolved. Because this wasn't happening now. It had already happened. That's when he turned, not to the board, to me. And for the first time in my life, he didn't look at me like I was behind him. He looked at me like I was ahead. You planned this, he said. Not angry, not accusing, just understanding. I shook my head. No. Pause. I understood it. That was the difference. And he knew it. We'll begin transition planning, the chairman said. Effective, immediate, and just like that, It was done. No argument, no vote, because the outcome had already aligned. No one rushed out. No one reacted. Because this wasn't a shock. It was confirmation. As the room emptied, he stayed seated, still, silent. And for the first time, he wasn't the one holding everything together. He was the one being replaced. He didn't leave the room right away. That was the first sign. Not anger, not resistance, stillness. The kind that comes when there's nothing left to control. Everyone else walked out, quietly. No one looked at him. No one said anything, because this wasn't conflict. It was conclusion. I stayed, not to confront him, not to explain anything, just because leaving immediately would have made it easier. And nothing about this was supposed to be easy. He sat there, hands on the table, not moving. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then finally, "They trust you." Not a question, a realization. I didn't respond, because he already knew the answer. "It's not because you're better," he said. There it was. Still holding on, still trying to define it. "It's because you made it visible," I replied. That stopped him. Because visibility is something he never valued. He believed in outcomes, not in how they were built. "I built this," he said, not defensive, just stating something he needed to hold on to. "You did," I said. Pause. "But you didn't build it to last without you." Silence. Because that was the part he hadn't faced, not the success, the dependency. For years, he believed he was the reason everything worked. And for a long time, he was right. But systems grow. And once they grow, what worked before becomes the problem. "When did this happen?" he asked. Not accusing, not emotional, just trying to understand. "It didn't happen," I said. Pause. "It was always there." That landed harder than anything else, because it meant something simple. This wasn't a takeover, it was exposure. "You didn't replace me," he said. Closer now, closer to understanding. I looked at him, calm. "I made it so you could be replaced." Silence, deep, heavy, because that was the truth. Not emotional, structural. He leaned back, slowly, not defeated, but changed. Because for the first time, he saw something clearly. He wasn't losing control. He had built something that only worked with control. And that doesn't last. "What happens to me now?" he asked. That question was different. Not about the company, about himself. I thought about it. Not emotionally, clearly. "You step back," I said. "How far?" he asked. "As far as the system needs." Silence. Because now, he understood something. This wasn't about position, it was about necessity. "You think I was wrong about you," he said. Not defensive, not proud, just honest. I paused. Because this wasn't simple. "You weren't wrong about me," I said. Pause. "You were wrong about what mattered." That stayed. Because it wasn't an attack. It was clarity. He didn't respond after that. He just sat there, looking at the table, not thinking about losing his position, thinking about something else. How long it had been there, without him seeing it. By the time we spoke again, the company had already moved on. Not dramatically, not loudly, quietly, structurally. The decisions were cleaner, the processes were clearer, the pressure lower. Not because I changed everything, because the system no longer depended on him. And once that happens, everything stabilizes. We didn't meet in the office, not his, not mine. Somewhere neutral, small, quiet. No glass walls, no large table, no audience. Just 2 chairs. And everything that had already been decided. He arrived first, already seated. Not as a leader, as someone waiting. I sat across from him. No tension, no expectation, because there was nothing left to prove. It's running better, he said. Not defensive, not resentful, just observing. Yes, I replied. Silence. Then, you didn't change everything. Closer now, more accurate. No, I said. Pause. I removed what was in the way. That landed. Because now, he understood the difference. For years, he believed he was the reason everything worked. Now, he saw something else. The system worked. Despite him. Not because of him. When did you stop trying to prove me wrong? He asked. That question mattered. Because it meant something. He finally understood what this wasn't about. I thought about it. Not long. The moment I realized you didn't understand the system, I said. Silence. Because that was the truth. Not emotional. Not personal. Structural. I called you a failure, he said. Not apologizing, not defending, just acknowledging. Yes, I replied. Pause. And you were right. He looked up, sharp, confused, because that wasn't what he expected. I failed in your system, I continued. Pause. But your system wasn't built to last. Silence. Complete. Because that sentence closed everything. Not as revenge, as understanding. He didn't argue, didn't correct, didn't defend. Because for the first time, he had nothing left to prove, and nothing left to control. He sat there for a while, longer than before, not thinking about the company, thinking about something else, what he had built, and what it actually was. When he stood up, he didn't look like a man replaced. He looked like a man who finally understood why he could be, and that mattered more. Because replacement isn't loss, it's consequence. He didn't stop being the leader when I took his place. He stopped being the leader the moment the system no longer needed him.